If you were kicked out of the very bank you owned, what would you do? At 2:47 p.m. on a Tuesday afternoon, under the dome lights of the marble, ceilinged Atlas Capital headquarters, a woman stepped inside. She wore a simple charcoal blazer, her hair neatly tied back, soft leather shoes that made no sound, and a brown crossbody bag slung over her shoulder like any other office visitor. No one in the lobby recognized her. No one knew that the seemingly ordinary woman standing before them was the founder of the very bank they worked for. Her name was Celeste Morgan, and on paper she owned 71% of Atlas Capital. But at that moment, all they saw was a woman of color, unannounced, without a name tag or any visible sign of authority. Behind the walnut reception desk stood Daniel Keene, age 20, taught 8, a recent MBA graduate from a private university, appointed branch manager just 3 months prior. He glanced up briefly and immediately frowned. "Sorry, this is a private transaction area. We only serve clients with scheduled appointments," he said with a stiff tone, his voice laced with barely concealed condescension. One of the 2 security guards behind him straightened and stepped forward half a pace, a silent show of control. Nearby clients began to take notice, a few discreetly pulling out their phones to record. Celeste said nothing. She simply placed her small wallet on the counter, unlatched it, pulled out a shimmering platinum American Express Centurion card, then tucked it away again, as if it were a meaningless gesture. Daniel paid no attention, crossing his arms and signaling the guard to step closer. "You can't just walk in here and demand service like that, you know," he said, loudly enough for everyone nearby to hear. "People like you should know their place." He ended with a smug smile, as if he had just restored order. Celeste looked at him in silence. There was no visible anger on her face, no hint of pain, only the quiet gaze of someone who had heard words like that too many times in her life to be surprised anymore. "I think you just made a very serious mistake," she said softly, almost like speaking to herself, but loud enough to reach every recording camera in the room. What Daniel thought was just another routine dismissal was about to turn into something he could never undo, and the woman he misjudged in a single moment was about to unravel his entire career in less than 20 minutes. The air in the bank lobby grew thick the moment Daniel Keene's voice rang out once again, repeating the words, "People like you should know their place," this time louder, as if he needed the crowd to witness his authority. From the far left corner, a young woman quietly spoke into her phone while live streaming. "You see that? This is what blatant discrimination looks like." The viewer count on her screen jumped from 300 to over 1,200 in less than a minute. Celeste stood still. No protest, no explanation, no need to shout who she was. Instead, she simply looked at Daniel as if watching someone who had just lit the fuse to his own downfall without even realizing it. Daniel, oblivious to the shift in energy around him, gestured to the guard to step forward. "Ma'am, please leave the premises. If you do not comply, we will contact the police." Celeste didn't move. Her eyes shifted to the security guard, hesitating as he approached. "Do you really think I'm causing a disturbance?" The question was soft, almost weightless, yet it made him falter. 15 years working at various branches, he'd seen his share of difficult clients, but never someone so unnervingly calm. Something wasn't right. Celeste reached into her bag again, this time pulling out a sleek black phone, thin and elegant, with 3 small letters engraved on the back. CAM. She tapped into her contacts, scrolling to a name that had long been prepared. No hesitation, no sigh. Just a single call, lasting exactly 15 seconds. Lucas, code 14, central to branch. Start now. Then she hung up and tucked the phone away, as if nothing had happened. Daniel stared at her, confusion and contempt flickering in his eyes. Who did you just call? Your lawyer? The press? Celeste said nothing. Instead, she glanced at her watch, a deep green leather, banded Cartier, then looked up and spoke. I'm giving you 2 minutes. After that, I can't guarantee you'll still have access to this building. She didn't raise her voice. She didn't flash a business card or demand to see a superior. It was simply a statement, as though it had already been scheduled. Daniel scoffed. 2 minutes to call security again, is that it? The live stream had now crossed 4,500 viewers. More phones were coming out. In the marble-floored lobby of the bank, the woman they dismissed was about to shake the entire system, without anyone ever seeing it coming. Beneath the warm golden lights cast over the cold marble floor, Celeste Morgan stood still, a quiet figure amid the rising wave of murmurs and whispers. She said nothing more after her 2-minute declaration, simply set her bag to the side, crossed her arms, and waited, her eyes occasionally glancing at her Cartier watch as if tracking a countdown only she truly understood. Branch manager Daniel remained behind the counter, masking his growing unease by tapping repeatedly on the desk, occasionally barking clipped orders at nearby staff. What he failed to see was that control had already slipped from his hands. From the back office, Assistant Branch Manager Elise Tran stepped out, drawn by the tension spreading across the lobby. Known for her reserved nature and strict adherence to protocol, Elise moved to assist Daniel, unaware that within minutes she would face choices that could alter the course of her entire career. "What's going on?" she asked quietly. Daniel muttered, "A walk in refusing to leave. She's causing a disturbance." Celeste turned to Elise, her gaze steady. "If you'd like to verify my account, try searching the name Celeste A. Morgan. If the system's functioning correctly, it should appear at the very top." Elise hesitated briefly, but pulled out her tablet, typing in the name. As the result appeared, along with a system alert reading, "Priority Access Level 1. Founder." Her face went rigid. She swallowed hard, unable to believe what she was seeing, then turned to Daniel, ready to speak. But before she could say a word, a series of internal alerts began flashing across her screen. Code 14, activated. Urgent. Regional VP en route to Central Branch. De-escalation required. A chill ran through her. At Atlas Capital, Code 14 was only triggered under 2 circumstances, either suspected internal fraud at the highest level or the unannounced arrival of an executive board member. Just then, Celeste glanced at her watch once more and said softly, 47 seconds remaining. Daniel, still oblivious to the gravity of the situation, tried to salvage his authority with a mocking smirk. "And what exactly are we counting down to? A press conference?" Elise froze. She didn't know whether to step in or remain silent. She looked again at Celeste, the calm presence, the quiet command, the voice that carried the weight of something already decided. And then a chime sounded. The elevator at the far end of the lobby gave its familiar ding as the doors opened. Two men in suits stepped out briskly, their expressions tense. One of them was Thomas Brandt, Regional Vice President of Atlas Capital. The other, the Director of Internal Compliance. Neither spoke. They walked directly to Celeste, stopped in front of her, and bowed their heads. No one in the lobby was laughing anymore. When Thomas Brandt stepped into the bank lobby, it was as if the air had been sucked out of the room. The regional vice president, known for his composure, was now visibly breathless, as if he had just sprinted there. His tie was slightly askew, and his blazer hung open, the buttons undone. His eyes scanned the crowd swiftly and stopped when they landed on the woman standing calmly at the center of it all. "Dr. Morgan," he said, barely above a whisper, his voice laced with disbelief, before quickly correcting himself with a reverence rarely seen in corporate settings. "I sincerely apologize." Onlookers froze in stunned silence, while Daniel Keene looked as though the blood had drained completely from his face. He turned toward Elise, searching for an explanation, but Elise couldn't speak. Her eyes were still fixed on the tablet screen, displaying the name. Celeste A. Morgan, founder and executive chair of Atlas Capital. Thomas bowed deeper, no longer a regional executive, but a subordinate standing before the woman who held the fate of the entire institution. "We had no idea you would be here. This never should have happened." Celeste simply nodded, without anger or expression. "I've been standing here for 14 minutes, and in those 14 minutes no one asked my name. They just looked at me and decided I wasn't worth their time." Daniel stepped back, his mouth opening and closing, unable to form a single word. Elise, hands trembling, quietly tapped through the access logs, her heart pounding as she realized the truth. The woman they had treated like a problem could erase their names from every system with a single command. Swallowing hard, she stepped forward. "Dr. Morgan, I didn't know." Celeste raised a hand gently, cutting her off. "You're not the one who needs to apologize today." Daniel stood frozen, his eyes now wide with pure panic. The live stream had surpassed 15,000 viewers, and every detail, from Daniel's faltering posture to the chilling calm in Celeste's voice, was being captured from 4 different angles. Thomas turned to Daniel, his voice sharp. "Do you even know who she is?" Daniel tried to respond, but no coherent words came out. Celeste spoke only once more before turning toward the elevators. 47th floor, boardroom. The meeting started 4 minutes ago. If you want to salvage your careers, I suggest you join me." No one blocked her path as she walked by, and no one dared to smile. On phone screens across the country, thousands of viewers typed the same words: "She owns the bank." The elevator doors closed behind them in absolute silence. Only the soft hum of metal rising through the shaft remained, and the floor numbers blinking upward, one by one, on the digital display. Inside the cabin, Celeste Morgan stood upright, arms still folded, her face expressionless. Elise stood behind her, clutching her tablet tightly as if it were a shield against the weight pressing down on her shoulders. And Daniel, the man who had once said, "People like you should know their place," stood hunched over, sweat beading on his forehead, unable to meet anyone's gaze. Celeste didn't raise her voice. She simply looked at Daniel and asked, her tone even, light as breath. "If I had said my name from the beginning, would you have treated me any differently?" Daniel stammered, struggling to salvage the last shred of his pride. Yes, I think I would have." Celeste gave a small nod. "So your behavior isn't based on respect for people, but on status and power. If that's true, then you're not just wrong. You're dangerous." Elise glanced at Celeste, her eyes a mixture of admiration and unease. Celeste hadn't interrupted anyone, hadn't threatened with her authority. Instead, she asked questions that sliced cleanly through layers of delusion like a sharp, quiet blade. I didn't know who you were," Daniel mumbled, his voice shrinking with every passing flaw. "If I had known, I definitely would have." "Would have what?" Celeste asked, still watching the floor numbers climb. "Smiled, addressed me by my title, opened the door and welcomed me in." She turned and looked Daniel straight in the eye. "That means for anyone you don't recognize, don't approve of, or don't find impressive, you assume they're beneath you." The elevator glided past the 40th floor. Elise remained silent, but her face betrayed the storm of thoughts racing through her mind. How many times had she unconsciously done the same? How many times had she stood by in silence when she should have spoken up? Celeste turned to her, as if reading her thoughts. "You're not a bad person. But today is the day you have to choose. Be the one who stays silent, or be the one who dares to make it right." Elise gave a faint nod, her grip tightening, as if sealing a promise to herself. Ding. 47th floor. The doors opened to reveal a long carpeted hallway, lit with soft golden light and lined with framed artwork. At the end of the corridor stood the boardroom, its glass doors revealing a circle of brown leather chairs arranged around a long ebony conference table stretching more than 10 meters. Celeste stepped out first, her pace steady like the rhythm of a storm that had long been forewarned. And this time, no one walked ahead to guide her. No one dared to stop her. They had only one choice left: to follow. The glass doors of the boardroom swung open, and for a moment, the air inside seemed to tighten, as if a cold current had swept through the room. 12 board members, seated around the long table, fell silent, their conversations cut short, all eyes turning toward the woman who had just entered. Dr. Celeste Morgan walked directly to the center, still carrying her simple shoulder bag, the silver gleam of her Cartier watch catching the light as she connected her tablet to the presentation system. No one interrupted. No one asked why she was there. Her presence alone was a declaration of authority. "Apologies for the interruption," she began, her voice soft but resonant in the enclosed space. "But I believe what I'm about to share is far more important than any revenue report currently under review." At the head of the table, the large screen lit up with footage from the live stream in the lobby. Daniel Keene's image appeared in sharp detail, his voice amplified through the boardroom speakers. "People like you should know their place." A few board members flinched, others stared in disbelief. When the clip reached the moment Celeste made her call, an audible gasp escaped from James Hartley, the general counsel, as he scrambled to open his notebook. The video ended with the regional vice president bowing his head in apology to Celeste in the center of the lobby. She turned to face the room, her gaze sweeping across each face. "This is not simply a personal incident," she said clearly. "This is the direct consequence of a system left unchecked. When staff believe they have the right to discriminate, when managers think they can act without questioning themselves, that is when an organization begins to breed distortion." Daniel, standing behind Elise, tried to speak. I didn't know who you were. If I had known." "That's the problem," Celeste cut in, her eyes locked on his. "You shouldn't have to know who I am to treat me with decency. A bank cannot assign human worth based on a customer profile. Every condescending look, every dismissive word is a failure of our mission." Elise held her breath, and Daniel stood frozen in place. Celeste turned back to the screen and advanced to the next slide. The Celeste Protocol, a comprehensive reform system for every branch of this bank. One by one, the objectives appeared: ongoing training in unconscious bias, audits of discriminatory behavior, real-time monitoring of client interactions. She paused, then looked directly at the chair of the board. "I didn't come here to destroy anyone. I came to make sure this never happens again. Today, we are not just deciding the fate of one employee. We are choosing the direction of an entire institution." No one sat still anymore. No one saw her as just that woman again. From that moment forward, everyone in the room understood one thing clearly, Doctor. Celeste Morgan was not just a name. She was the reckoning this generation of leadership never saw coming. After the presentation, the room fell into a heavy silence. The air felt thick with tension, suspended between the numbers just displayed and the undeniable truth shown in the video. Celeste Morgan didn't need to push the matter any further, because the very system they once believed was unshakable had already begun to tremble beneath them. The chair of the board slowly rose to his feet, scanning the room before turning to Celeste. "I propose a full vote on the reform plan, from the Celeste Protocol to all related disciplinary policies." Every hand was raised, not a single vote against. Daniel Keene was escorted out of the room in silence, his face pale as chalk. His severance benefits were revoked, and his access to the internal system was fully terminated within 3 minutes. Elise, on the other hand, was given the opportunity to remain under the condition that she complete a full training program on bias awareness and real-time client interaction monitoring within 6 months. She nodded, grateful, unable to speak, her eyes filled with a resolve never to repeat the same mistake. The next day, Celeste held a press conference to announce the comprehensive reform plan. The campaign's headline read, "Not just apologies, we're changing." Newspapers, television, and social media all covered the story. The hashtag #CelesteProtocol trended nationwide. Competing banks immediately called internal meetings to review their own discriminatory practices. Within a week, 3 major financial institutions announced the adoption of similar principles to retain their clients. What began as a confrontation in a bank lobby, Celeste Morgan transformed into a national reckoning. And above all, she didn't threaten, sue, or shout. She simply stood her ground with dignity intact and forced an entire system to rise to meet her. 6 weeks after the seismic incident at Atlas Capital's central branch, the atmosphere within the building had completely transformed. Signs reading "Fair Service," "Respect for every customer" were proudly displayed at each transaction counter. Digital message boards cycled through these words in 3 languages: English, Spanish, and Vietnamese. Tellers now wore small badges that read, "We listen without judgment." But the most profound changes didn't come from slogans. They came from people. Maria Gonzalez, formerly an assistant manager at a suburban branch, was appointed as the new branch manager. With 15 years of experience and an unwavering philosophy of equal treatment for all clients, she quickly restored trust from within. Elise, after completing her enhanced training and 6 months of probation, had become the lead facilitator for unconscious bias workshops across the entire system. In one meeting, she said, "The moment I stayed silent that day nearly ended my career. Now I use that voice to make sure it never happens again." Celeste Morgan no longer needed to visit each branch to check compliance. The new monitoring system, personally approved by her, automatically flagged irregular interactions between staff and customers, sending alerts directly to upper management. Atlas Capital not only led in post-crisis growth, but also became the first bank in the region to report 0 discrimination complaints for 60 consecutive days. 1 year later, Celeste returned to the very lobby where it all began. But this time, there were no dismissive stares, no security guards approaching. Everyone rose to greet her, by name. Phones were no longer live-streaming humiliation, but capturing the presence of a living symbol of transformation. She smiled and stepped inside, as gently as someone returning to the place where she awakened an entire industry. And there, in a space that seemed unchanged, everything had become forever different. The incident at Atlas Capital was not just a lesson in discrimination. It was a powerful testament to the strength of composure, courage, and strategic timing. Dr. Celeste Morgan did not choose to react with anger, nor did she demand justice through accusations. Instead, she let the truth speak for itself, exposing the cracks in a system that had long been hidden beneath white collars and professional smiles. What began as a seemingly personal slight became the catalyst for a sweeping reform across the financial industry. Celeste did not simply retaliate. She corrected a broken structure so that others would no longer have to endure the same condescending gaze she once faced. That is what true leadership looks like. Not revenge, but rebuilding. If you believe that change begins with how we respond to injustice, make sure to like and subscribe to help us share more stories that inspire. Every subscription not only supports us in creating deeper and more meaningful content, but also serves as a quiet nod to kindness, fairness, and a better world for all. And if Celeste Morgan's story gave you something to think about, leave a comment with the words, "No more silence." Because sometimes all it takes to transform an entire system is one person who chooses to stand up at exactly the right moment. Thank you for watching. We'll see you in the next video, where we continue to tell true stories of real people who are quietly changing the world.